Thank you, Tobias. Thank you very much for being with us, first of all. And which are the most important aspects in working with public art? Which are the main issues involved with the sharing creative ideas with public institutions, public visitors themselves too?
I mean, as it already says, the public is the most important about public art. Um, like the difference, I think that to art in a museum, of course, is people decide to go to a museum. They even pay entrance, maybe, and they say, okay, I want to see this. Public art is a bit the other way around. Maybe you're standing in the way of somebody, that that doesn't like it, and that has, or some people have other ideas what to do with it, not just looking at it, but spraying at it, tagging it, and these are all things I think you have to consider when you do public art. Like that you have to also try to include. I mean, of course, you cannot always include everybody. Also, I don't know, like if somebody builds a street, not everybody likes it, but you have to consider that there's people who are not experts in art who might want to have a different, or might need a different approach, might need a different invitation. So I think that's the main point, that that you're making something that not everybody has been asking for.
And in your current experience, do you have any favorite theme or favorite medium to express yourself? Any preferred working process, maybe?
I think, I mean, not preferred medium. I work in so many different mediums and with so many different materials and so many different. But I think what you have to consider again, is like, again, in relation to something like a museum, where nowadays most of the museum are kind of following this ideology of a white cube and so on. You never have a neutral space. Everything is loaded. Like the geographically, socially, philosophically, historically, there's a lot of issues, and they're all part of what you have to think about. And of course, sometimes you can ignore something but then there has to be a conscious decision to leave this out, but all these things are there. It's not a neutral space. It's the opposite of a neutral space, and I think that's the most important when you start thinking about. And the process for me is that's not so different, like you have the setup, you consider your ideas, you consider what kind of problems you have, and that creates the work. And then you have the normal process of trying to give it a shape, trying to give it an existence. In my case, most of the time I start drawing a little bit, and I work with my computer people to make like 3D models and everything. Yeah, so that's a kind of more or less a routine, and then, but of course, also there, all the steps, like you always have to kind of do your checklist, does it still work with all the parameters you gave it?
Understand. You work on the borders between art, design, architecture. Therefore, I may ask you, are there still borders of this kind? If yes, which are they? And what is art at last?
Sometimes bit of a misunderstanding about my work. I mean, I might work on the borders of all of them, but I'm not so interested in like pulling down the borders. It's more like, like how do you describe the world? Like you yourself. Like what's the most important tool you have? And I think the most important tool you have is describing something by differences. Why for a lot of things is also in flux. It's not a you describe it once and then you come back the next week and it might be different. So I'm using other fields in order to to get a clearer picture for myself what art is, you know? It's not, I mean, I'm not so interested in design, or I'm not so interested in, I mean, I am somehow interested, but what I'm really interested is in what art is. And I use methods and strategies and techniques from other fields in order to understand what art is. That's my problem, you know. I don't understand what art is. So let's say a birthday cake is a birthday cake because it's a birthday cake. I think it's a birthday cake because we believe it's a birthday cake. We look at it as a birthday cake. So of course you can have I don't know, a telephone and describe that as a sculpture, as a piece of art. The question is, you know, how important, how interesting, how complex, how much can this change your idea about what art is anyways? You can use a giacometic sculpture to kill somebody, you know? So in that moment, it's not so important if it's an art piece or not, you know? Then it's more important that it's heavy enough to hit a hole in somebody's head, you know? And that's a matter of perspective always. And if we want to describe something in art, no matter what it is, we can do that. But the question then is, how interesting is it in the whole context of what we know and what we think about art? So I don't think the things are something in themselves. I think the things are something in how we use them.
Regarding perspective, you worked in different cultural environments, Africa, Asia, America, combining different cues and starting points. Do you believe his art is really a tool for communication, for dialogue?
But in the end, it's a dialogue with yourself and how you suddenly understand. If it's a great artwork, you know, the best thing that can happen is that you understand how limited you are and what a kind of narrow-minded person you've been until you understood what this artwork did to you, you know? I think that's the ideal situation. So it's also a dialogue between people, but not so much in a kind of cozy, you know, like, oh, it's so nice that we can talk to each other. I think it's more talking to yourself. That's the most interesting chat you can have by the help of an artwork.
Thank you very much, Tobias. Thanks a lot.
It was a pleasure.